Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat sermon with Rabbi Rebecca Schatz.
I struggle with the narrative that we as Jews understand better and more personally the slavery that our country allowed for far too long, of blacks and those who white people believed were subservient to them. After our Temple Beth trip to the south, it was even harder to imagine that the story of Moshe and the Hebrews was anywhere close to comparable. The slavery, persecution, racism, disrespect, and ill treatment of human beings because of the color of their skin should never have happened and should never be allowed to happen again. We have felt the repercussions of that time of slavery in our lifetimes far too long after it was supposed to have been done and ended completely. There is one aspect of slavery of the Hebrews and slavery in America that is the same, and that is we are both a people who are loathed for how we look, for our ability, and for our beliefs, but without reason or rationale. People were treated like workhorses or cranes or tractors or washing machines. Those who were slaves were not seen as people. They were seen as an object with a function towards a need. And why were they hated and enslaved in this way? Because they were better at those functions than the Egyptians or slave owners in America who suffered from their own inabilities and weaknesses. So instead of learning, or of listening, or of wondering how to grow and improve, they hated that which was better than them and created inhumane and horrific situations where the tasks were done well, but through pain and torture. In last week's Parsha, the scariest part of Pharaoh coming to power is the fact that he teaches and preaches and uses words to convince his people that the Hebrews are a threat. A common form of charismatic and yet destructive leadership. Vayakom melech chadash, a new king arose, al Mitzrayim, over Egypt, asher lo yada et Yosef. And he didn't know Joseph. The new king did not know a Hebrew who made life livable and manageable for both Hebrews and Egyptians, who kept every person alive during a famine and who worked well with others. This new king continues, Vayomer el amo, hine am b'nei Israel ra ve'atzum mimenu. Look, b'nei Israel, which, by the way, we have not yet been considered a people yet, but this new king is afraid of the camaraderie and communal relationship of the Hebrews. B'nei Israel is a lot and too numerous for us. He continues, this new king, let us deal wisely with them so that they cannot increase, because then they will join our enemies in fighting against us. So then the Hebrews had taskmasters set over them, and they were oppressed with forced labor to make sure they were weakened, and yet still functional for this new king. But the more they were oppressed, Torah says, the stronger they became, and the more they increased. Finding relationship with one another, we imagine, and taking on the mitzvah of being fruitful and multiplying to remain close to their people and their community. So in this week's Parsha, the Hebrews have been in slavery for a long time, and they've had enough. And as we heard in David's drash earlier today, God says, V'gam ani shamati en nakat b'nei Israel. I have heard the moaning of the Israelites, asher mitzrayim me'avadim otam ve'ezkor et briti. Because of their slavery, and I have remembered my covenant, God says. God then continues, say Moses to the Israelites, I'm God. I will free you from slavery, and I will deliver you from the Egyptians' bondage. I will redeem you with an outstretched arm. I will take you to be my people, and I will be your God. I'll bring you into the land that I swore to your ancestors, and I will give it to you. This all sounds great. And the slaves should be relieved. However, when Moses shares all of this with them, their reaction is, Velo sham'u el Moshe. They didn't hear Moshe. mikotzer ruach ume'avodah kasha, because their spirit had been crushed by the terribly hard slavery. Well, right. Totally understandable, no? How could anyone in a situation where they are constantly being beaten down and made to feel small and unimportant listen to a plan of redemption and think, thank God, I knew this was coming? No, their first reaction is, we have been abused and hurt and ruined. And now that you have come along to save us, we'll believe it when we see it. Rashi teaches us that this kotzer ruach is literally shortness of breath. And therefore, the Hebrew words used mean through anguish and literally shortness of spirit. Sforno drashes on this even more to say that the term mikotzer ruach shows that these words from a redemptive God did not appear believable to their present state of mind, so their heart could not assimilate to such a promise. And then Ibn Ezra adds that the people could not even hear it. They were too fed up with the situation to pay attention, and now finally listen. Slavery, Rabbi Avital Hochstein of Hadar, defines in Egypt as the loss of the ability to listen. She posits that these words describe the reality in which Israel finds itself, their inner world, their state of mind, and the narrowing of their human capacity. Rabbi Hochstein then concludes in the powerful way that you might imagine both she and I are leading into this text and bringing it into our reality. She says, the Parsha teaches us that if we encounter people who can't hear, people who seem to have stopped hoping for change, who from shortness of spirit no longer find the energy of body and soul to dream of a different reality, to dream of liberation, then there may be an element of slavery in their lives. The reality many of us live today, a reality of pressure, she says, of burnout and anxiety, can similarly lead to numbness and despair and the abandonment of hope and the dream of change. So in light of the verses of Parashat Vayera, such a condition can be understood as a form of slavery. The Torah urges us to shake off the numbness and the collapse of hope that accompany enslavement, and to become receptive once again, and able to hear the possibility of change, and to insist that things can be different. Our people's slavery is a very different slavery than that of American history. And I want to stress that I believe that it is important in how we continue to view ourselves in the world today. The Hebrews lost the ability to listen and became numb to the constant struggle and persecution and hardships of our past. And today, I worry that in a world of rampant anti-Semitism and attacks on our people in our own city, in Mississippi, in Bondi Beach, and elsewhere, that we are finding ourselves hiding and becoming complacent, slaves to this narrative of a hunted people. We must not allow ourselves to slump back into that numbness. The numbness also does not allow us to help others who are persecuted and vulnerable, because we are so worried about ourselves that we forget to also fight for and stand up for anyone in need. So I want to conclude with two modern female rabbis who have taught on this parsha. Rabbi Aaron Lieb Smokler from this book of Sfat Emet on the parsha teaches that exile is not a place. It is a condition of being in which we are closed down and shut off and unable to receive, unable to activate our faculties of imagination. It is the state of being stuck, of folded into ourselves, unable to open to the presence of another. To exit exile, then, we must render ourselves vulnerable, capacious, receptive. Redemption and revelation demand radical openness, an inner quieting so that we might hear the sounds of the others who call to us. And the second, Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt, in her drash, Not the End of the Story, shares that kotzer ruach means that we were short of breath in body and soul. So similar to what you shared, David. Our breath and our spirits were in surus, were in suffering. Literally at this point in our story, we are in Mitzrayim, Mitzarim, in the straits. But this isn't about geography, she says. It's about an existential state of being so constricted that we couldn't even hear the hope that things could be better. And our Torah story comes this week to remind us that kotzer ruach is not the end of the story. Being in dire straits, unable to breathe, unable to focus, hearts and souls unable to hope, is not the end of the story. On the contrary, it's the first step towards liberation. I don't actually believe, Rabbi Barenblatt says, that God needs us to cry out before God takes notice of us. I think, she says, it goes the other way. We need to cry out, because that's the first step in opening our hearts to God, to hope, to the possibility that in hardship things can get better. We cannot become slaves to the crushing world around us. We need to take a deep breath. We need to steady our hearts. We need to focus our minds and cleanse our souls to remember the task at hand. You might cry, and you might yell, and you might fight, but do so knowingly with full consciousness and not numb. The numbness we feel in this world is a heavy burden. It is slavery. And we are lucky to be a free people. So we need to start listening, and we need to stay strong.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.